for the participants. So feel free to use the chat box to respond. And yeah, that's about it. So just to begin with, and before I hand it over to Borsha, I just request everybody to write your name, the country where your organization or you are based out of, and what's the name of your organization that you represent today. Thank you, and over to you, Borsha.
Thank you, Pritha. And meanwhile, we are live on YouTube. Finally.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. So we will start with the session. We have three wonderful panelists doing wonderful work in different sectors, which today we are going to discuss. So to give you a little bit of context of today's discussion, it's basically what we're going to talk about, that how the world is at this point of time undergoing rapid digital growth, and there's a lot of usage and increased usage of the information and communication technology. But what we see that women, and especially those who are on the margin, who continues to face critical challenges in being included in this growing digital society. If we take this example, where World Wide Web Foundation and Alliance for Affordable Internet a few years back did a study where they have found that 21% men are 21% more likely to be online than women. And the percentage is up to 52% in the least developed countries. So you can imagine the gap, the digital gender gap is so high. And it is not a temporary problem. And during COVID, we have faced this even more, that how lack of digital access and control and literacy can exclude the most marginalized, and in this case, especially women and girls. Now, if we come back to UN SDG goal 4 and 5, which is something we are non-negotiables, right? All the countries are signatory to these two important goals, which is access to education, financial inclusion of women and girls, and these are considered as two key indicators for development if we consider the growth of the entire nation. So it's becoming more and more important to highlight the issues which is faced by women and girls, and especially from the marginalized community, caused due to the increased adoption of technology and digitization. So there is a need for a very cohesive intervention. Otherwise, this gap might just keep broadening. So today's panel, that's the plan. Basically, we are going to explore different critical aspects which are considered as a contributor to women's growth in development index, such as education, safety, and the role of technology. How do we create tech solutions? And we have three wonderful panelists. We have Elsa Marit de Silva. She's a co-founder of Red Dot Foundation. We have Lisa Adams. She works with the Girls Effect Africa. And we have Shushmita Chaudhary. She's part of Asia South Pacific Association for Basic and Education. So thank you very much. If you can switch on your cameras. Pritha, if you can remove the shared screen, I think that's why she's not... can you please try switching on your cameras?
Barsha, hi, this is Elsa. I can't switch on for some reason.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Can you try from your end?
I think you have to give the permission, Borsha.
I have to give the permission. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying. Just give me a second. I am not able to find any.
Is there a way to make me a co-host or something? So then that
because you.
Yes, I think.
Yeah, I mean, let me try. I'll just check if I can make all of you co-host. And
yes.
That solves the problem. Can you try now, Elsa?
Yes.
Great.
That's better.
Technology.
Yeah, mine is still not working.
I am making all of you co-host, I think. Yeah. Now I think you can switch on. Great. Thank you. So, Preetha is going to put your detailed bio in the chat box. So, don't need to go through. But if you want to introduce yourself like in one liner, all of you, that will be great. And then we can start with our questions. Elsa, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I'm usually based in Mumbai, but I'm currently joining you from Oxford, the UK. My name is Elsa Marie De Silva. I'm the founder of Red Dot Foundation and the president of Red Dot Foundation Global. Both are nonprofits that work on gender equity, safety, and justice.
Thank you, Elsa. Shushmita?
Hello, everyone. Myself, Sushmita. I work with Asia South Pacific Association for Basic and Adult Education. We are basically registered in Philippines, but we work in 34 countries in Asia South Pacific. And we work on right to education, promoting transformative education through lifelong learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa?
Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa Adams, and I'm from Cape Town in South Africa. I am Girlifix, Director of Product and Technology, and I'm also the founder of an organization called Citizen Code. Girlifix is an international nonprofit organization, and we're focused on unlocking the power of girls through media and technology. And I've got about 13 years experience building tech for impact. So I'm really excited to join the conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Today's discussion is not going to be very structured where people will come with like PPT and present, but it's going to be extremely conversational. And feel free to ask questions. Feel free to write on the chat box your comments, your suggestions on how you're using technology. And Preetha, my colleague Preetha, she's going to put out polls. We have generated some polls, and please feel free to participate. I'll just start with the first question. How do you see the connection between technology and gender? I mean, through your current work, because all of you are working in specific sectors. At the same time, you are using technology. So it would be great if we can have like an understanding of the kind of work you are doing and which intersecting gender and technology and that specific work. So Elsa, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So at Red Dot Foundation, the core of our work is a tech platform called Safe City. It's one word, Safe City, SAFECITY. It's a crowd map. What is a crowd map? It crowdsources anonymous stories of sexual and gender-based violence and then pins it on a map so that you can see it as hotspots or location-based trends. And the idea behind this is that most sexual and gender-based violence gets unreported, leading to a data gap. And that data gap can be bridged by anonymous reporting. Furthermore, this data is available open source so that people can use it either to increase their situational awareness so that they can find better strategies to deal with the violence, or mobilize and organize their communities to find solutions that are appropriate and relevant, and to also work with institutional stakeholders like police, civic authorities, so that there can be accountability, better implementation of policies and laws, as well as deployment of resources like manpower or financial resources for better infrastructure. So that's what we do. As you know, sexual and gender-based violence, women and girls are disproportionately at the receiving end of it. Not that men and boys don't experience it or other genders, but it's more for women and girls. And really, when we look at even the digital space, the violence that you're experiencing in the physical world sometimes traverses between these spaces. We tend to think of the digital space as a completely different world, but it's not true. It's part of our reality nowadays, and therefore it's very important for us to understand the different forms of violence, the intersectionality that it plays with maybe education, race, caste, class, identity, and even disability. So having this kind of data set that is generated through Safe City is very important, because you can use it in your own programming to make the world a safer space, whether it's a physical space, a digital space, a private or a public space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elsa. I'll move to Shushmita, because you were working on education, and it'll be very interesting to know that what do you see at this point of time, and what kind of insights you have from your work, and especially post-COVID. Shushmita, you have to unmute.
Yeah. Thank you, Boshan. Thanks to Breakthrough for giving this opportunity. Before I get into the detail and how we are seeing in terms of education, how it is working out in when we talk about digital learning and digital education, ASBE has been working in these countries that I mentioned earlier through our member organizations. It's the Asia Pacific Regional Network. And our way of work is basically through 4 strategies. One is, of course, capacity building of our members, and then leadership development, and then strategic partnerships, advocacy, policy advocacy, and of course, institutional strengthening. So we through this capacity building, through evidence-based research that we generate, we get into advocacy at the national level, regional level, and at the global level. So that's the way that we are working. And digital education is one of the area that is one of our focus area. Now, digital learning is not a new phenomena. It has been around for quite some time. Like maybe if we can go back up, maybe 1982 was like first when it started, the concept. And we have seen that there has been a lot of usage of digital education in different manners. However, the COVID made it like the scenario so much different, so we saw some positive aspects also, because there were so many ways of learning. We saw usage of TV, radio, different other technological devices. At the same time, within our members in Asia Pacific, we have seen how they have used social media for mental health support, psychosocial support. So these are there. Simultaneously, we have also seen how digital education can also lead to digital divide, which is so obvious, and a huge chunk of the people who are left behind. And what we are seeing is that it has not only challenged the learners, the teachers, but also the government, because it is also something so new which came up suddenly, like one morning you wake up and it's those things are happening. So that it's also a challenging thing for the government as well to redefine the learning and how they can do it. And when we try to link it with gender, what we have seen in the Asia Pacific through our work, through our members, is that when we try to look into from gender perspective, it's even worse. For example, in the least developed countries where the internet usage pre-COVID, during COVID for males is 28%, for female is even less than half. So it's so much of difference that we have. Secondly, there are gender norms and cultures which also act as a barrier for young girls and women to access internet. Access of the device, we have seen, I think in India, we are all majorly from India, and we have seen in India, like there is one device in the household and it is used by the male person. So there is no access to the female that she can use it whenever it is required. And we have seen like instances of suicides where the girl was not allowed to use the smartphone to study, and which has led to such kind of things. Of course, there is online privacy and safety and all those things. Other 2 things that I would like to mention over here is about how the learners with disability are even more disadvantaged. Because we have seen in our work in Philippines and other countries is that there is a question of access. There is a question of disability assisted device, because it's not always that they can use the device that many of us can use. So that's one challenge. And of course, the guidance is lacking. There is also the question of skills. It's not only that you have the access, but you need to learn how to do it. And in most cases, the women and girls are not in a position to learn, or they are not given the opportunity to learn the thing. There is also, I think, at some point of time, a fatigue, what we call it, digital fatigue. It's so much of learning through digitally and no face to face, which lead to mental health issues. We are all using smartphones or like technology, different types of technology. But I think we all agree that it also leads to a lot of distractions as well. So I will put up to this over here, and thank you both.
Thank you, Sushmita. That was very important, like how you laid down what are the challenges you have faced and still facing, especially in terms of education and other factors to it. I'll come to Lisa, because Girls Effect works on solutions, and so I mean, how has been your experience dealing with this whole push of digitization and yet the lack of access control and literacy? Yeah.
Cool, thank you. I'm going to speak a little bit about Girl Effect's journey. So at Girl Effect, we've got at the moment an cumulative of more than 10 years experience building both media products and technology products. In the media landscape, we've done a lot of work around TV drama shows, radio drama series, youth magazines, and designing youth brands. And then we've got our suite of digital technologies across Africa and Asia. So I'll start with a bit of a history on that tech journey and how we've come about. So our digital technologies were initially conceptualized around the design of Mobi sites in around 2014. And over time, we developed more than 70 Mobi sites in more than 50 countries in 14 different languages. And all of this was available at no cost for the user. And we managed to reach millions of girls through these youth-branded Mobi sites and low-fidelity technology. The Mobi sites was designed around providing girls with information relating to key moments in their lives, their bodies, their futures, and their stories. So that they could voice their comments. So we built lots of cool features around these Mobi sites, like girls being able to actually ask questions and engage with the moderator and receive answers, and participate in knowledge testing and quizzes, and even designing their own stories through user-generated content and competitions. So the inception of our Mobi sites really laid the foundation, not only as the entry point to the web development space, but it also taught us a lot about making sure that all our users, regardless of their device types, had meaningful and dignified experiences of the internet. And that's why I like to always take us back to where this tech journey started. So just a little bit of information about Mobi sites. They're very lo-fi technology, but probably my favorite piece of technology. So they're really simple. A way to understand, if you've not come across a Mobi site before, is imagine trying to load a website like Facebook onto a feature phone. A phone that has a very small screen, probably like an eighth of the screen size of an average iPhone. And the website doesn't resize itself, right? So it stays as big as it would be on your desktop computer. You'd have to horizontally scroll and zoom in and out to try to navigate around that website. And that's a really terrible user experience, right? So Mobi sites was really key in our foundations in giving us the capability to think about and create a more tailored experience for our users. And forced us to sort of come up with ways to resize and containerize our content so that it was easy to read, and that it was cost efficient and also easily replicable. And these early stage technology foundations definitely like set the stage for our journey into our more progressive products that we've designed afterwards, like our mentorship apps that we've built in India. We've built financial literacy apps in Indonesia, and a fair bit of responsive web apps as well. Most recently, and very much in recognition of the number of girls now using messaging apps, we developed two chatbots, Big Sis and Bolbehen. So both of them are live on Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp. So Big Sis is our AI or artificial intelligence powered chatbot, and that provides girls in South Africa with safe, private, and non-judgmental information on topics that they wouldn't generally feel comfortable asking elsewhere. And Bolbehen, which means speak sister. I hope I'm getting the pronunciation right. Okay, so Bolbehen answers girls' questions on sensitive topics as well, like relationships and reproductive health, and most of them are living within India's Hindi belt. So as technology evolves and girls' habits change, we continuously strive to adapt and improve the platforms and the infrastructure that underpin everything that we do. So where we are at the moment in our technology development is very much focused on extending our AI capabilities. I think everybody's generally excited and interested in AI at the moment, but really trying to figure out what this means for the demographic that we deal with. And at the same time, we're also on a mission. I like to call it a mission because it's quite a big task of redesigning our data infrastructure so that we can better understand our users' like health journeys and improving our ability to refer them to the right services at the right time. That's obviously very challenging considering the device types and like tracking user journeys across platforms. And then we're also focusing on developing technologies like React apps to design and facilitate girl clubs in our key focus regions, like Tanzania, Kenya, South Africa, and Ethiopia. And these prototypes are really exciting because it's looking into the way that we can support young girls and women who want to host learning sessions with the content that we've built and to guide their communities through safe and like accurate information about their well-being. So all of this technological design is really exciting and ambitious, but we need to recognize that it needs to be informed by data. And globally, we're facing a massive gender data gap problem, and we need to urgently understand, who is being left behind. Personally, I think that the greatest weapon we have as technologists is to ensure that we are breaking this gender data gap. And to do this, and due to launch in the next few months, UNICEF has partnered with Girl Effect, the Vodafone Americas Foundation, and Malala Fund on the largest global study of adolescent access and the use of mobile. So the research project is a joint commitment to the UN's generation equality. And we're hoping to create a new baseline in a post-COVID-19 world of girls' digital realities. And the study will be focusing on things like the differences between boys and girls in their levels of access, their social norms around girls and mobile, and the extent of gatekeeping by parents, and also looking deeply into the positive and negative impacts on mental health. So I'm really excited for us to be able to share that data globally very soon.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Yeah, I mean, that's very interesting. I mean, if you look at the spectrum of our conversation, I mean, where we do have people working with the tech solution, trying to address the gap, and also people who are working in like core issues like education and looking, I mean, dealing with those technical gaps. And thank you very much for sharing your own work and how you're working. And we just don't have question only for our panelists. We do have question for the audience as well. So Preetha, if you can put the first question for the audience, and then I can go to the next bit of it.
So I will type it out in the chat box, Borsha and the panelists, and I think you can continue, and I'm just requesting everybody to give their answers in the chat box only.
Thank you, Preetha. Moving forward, I mean, we do understand that the all the spaces what you're working, one of the key thing which is kind of common, which is lack of access, less number of women, lesser percentage of women holding devices, patriarchal norms making it very difficult for women. Even if you have access, there are a lot of scrutiny, surveillance. If you face any kind of a harassment, if you don't know how to do, you're mostly asked to get off those platforms and do not use it, than basically making them literate about the thing. And we at Breakthrough also work with youth to build their digital media literacy so that they can use, access, and control better. In this context, it will be great to understand what are the best practices you could perform, especially especially post-COVID. I think pre-COVID, we were still taking it a little slow in terms of adopting technology. But when COVID happened, yes, you just rightly said, Shushmita, overnight, we had no option. We had to take this up, right? So obviously, initially, we were like really overwhelmed with the entire situation. We don't know how to deal with it. But all of us could come up with some interesting practices which worked for all of us. So I'll start with Shushmita. What has been your practice from your organization, because you're working across the Asia, and was it same in most of the country context, or was it different? Because I know for a fact, like I was working with some of the African organization and would love to hear from Lisa about it. It was very similar when it comes to girls' access and control. It was not at all different. But giving the layer of caste and other intersectional factors, what has been your experience in Asia and what worked for you the best?
Thanks, Barsha. So it's not like that one size will fit all. So it was different types that we have tried to use it. The most important that I think we used in most of the countries in Asia Pacific was our youth action research. So this is basically to enhance the capacities of the marginalized girls and women mainly, and then through them they get into the society, collect data. So it's more on anchored on the action research and try to find out what's happening on the ground and therefore recommend. And then the advocacy also takes it forward up to the national, means even at the community level and up to the global level. So what we did in, I think, 8 countries in Asia Pacific, which starts from India till Vanuatu in the Pacific, that we tried to understand the state, how COVID has impacted the young people through this action research, through this youth action research that we say. And from the findings, how the dissemination of the findings was also very interesting, because that was the time when there was no way of any face-to-face, because it was all online. And how do we do it? So it was through, like, in Philippines, what they did is, like, they call it Kalambak. Kalambak is kind of a podcast where they come together every week with a particular topic and they discuss on that topic, and it's the young people who are discussing on it. Then there were also different other ways of in different countries that they took. Then they came up with short videos. In Mongolia, for example, they came up with short videos which they would play through YouTube and other ways, also using WhatsApp to share the information. Another thing I would like to say about here is that, as PAY, we work on basic and adult education. So for us, adult learning and education is very important, and we feel that it's a right. Because when we talk technology, it's always like youth and young people and everything. But if we don't include the adults in it, and in this world especially, they are left out. They cannot access even their, like, basic right now, even their entitlements. Like, so much it has been digitized now. No, even if we see going to the bank, it has become so digitized. So how you use it? So again, in some of the countries we did, it is called senior city. Senior citizens, bringing the senior citizens together. And it was an intergenerational dialogue. So it's not only the senior citizens coming together, but we also brought in young people. It's kind of a learning for them. Like they talk about what are the challenges the seniors are facing, how the young people can be supportive in this whole process, and also the other way around, like the mental health issues and everything that they're facing, the stress, how the senior citizen can also, like it's kind of a dialogue that was happening in some of the members that we work with. um, and of course, there are also some other like app. I think you already know in India, Nirantar Trust, which is also our member, they came up with this app deal, which is a way of a digital literacy program among neo-literate and semi-literate, especially marginalized women and girls. So these are some of the ways. But as I said, it's not like one thing. It was different things at different countries, and it came out from them itself. It's not like we are going with something we know, because we don't know. We don't know what is the reality and how we can actually address it. So it is getting from them and try to build on it.
Thank you, Shushmita. I think it was very important to understand that why the programs or whatever technological solution we are thinking of should come from the community we are trying to work with, and not like we go and like use our ideas and fit there. So extremely important point. I will come to Elsa, and meanwhile there is some issue we are facing in the chat because people are not able to send the use the chat option.
I have fixed that.
Okay,
okay. I'm just writing that message again so that people use the chat.
Okay. Oh, great. Okay. So my question to Elsa, I think again, like you're working in the sector of safety, and wonderful work you're doing where you're just trying to live recording, real time data recording, and then basically helping other organizations who are working on safety to provide that data so that they can create. And also it's kind of a very interesting engagement. For if I am feeling harassed somewhere, I have an option to log into Safe City and just record. And so, I mean, what has been your experience? Do you see, like, before COVID and post COVID, this whole push of digitization, do you see any difference in terms of adoption, intaking? Do you see there is a rise? And also what has been, like, especially women and young girls are using your app. So what has been your experience? What worked the best for you?
Thank you for that question. So in my view, after COVID, or rather we are still in COVID, but since then, a lot of people are getting more comfortable with technology. So they are using it more than a phone, let's say, so accessing other features, checking out applications, and also using it to seek help. So when you asked about good practices, I think Safe City in itself is one example of a good practice, because there is no other app like ours to document your experience. There are others like Safety Pin to audit an area, but ours is not auditing an area. Ours is documenting your experience so that you can have access to a repository that can be used for patterns and trends. And that data set is so valuable because community-based organizations can actually use it in their advocacy. It can be a very targeted messaging to whichever stakeholder is identified based on what is coming up in the data. So for example, if transport is an issue for that community, then they can target that particular transport official. If it is a policing issue, then it's the police. If it is lighting, maybe the municipality. So, it's not one size fits all. The data will inform the solutions. And furthermore, it's the community that decides what is the solution. I cannot, as Red Dot Foundation, tell anyone what is the solution in their community. They know best. But we are just facilitating that because we are giving them information that is actionable, but is based on actual experiences. I want to qualify saying we are not an SOS app. I don't believe that because I know when I've gone through an incident, I freeze or my brain just doesn't work. So the last thing I'm thinking of is an application. Ours is when you've had the time to calm down and you're thinking, okay, do I need to talk about it? Do I need to document it? This is where you document it. And even if you weren't thinking of going to the police, our application will nudge you to do that. Because at the end of the primary report, the first report, which is just very simple, what happened to you, where it happened, the date, the time, or estimates of it, and the location, it'll tell you if you pick stalking, it'll give you the penal code for stalking, and it'll prompt you to go to the police station or talk to a helpline. Because it's anonymous, we can't really help you individually directly, but this is how we are trying to help you with the right information based on your experience. Now, we found that the communities that we work with, they've used this data in many different ways. One is either to talk to elders in the community who may not know about these experiences happening at such a pervasive level, to take an interest. So whether it's parents, elders, religious leaders, we often overlook the power they have in their community to talk to men and boys, for example. Or like in Bombay, we are working with Western Railways. But my partner in the Philippines, she works with mayors. So they've been engaging mayors to look at the data. And the mayors in turn have identified nonprofits to collect the data and use the data to give recommendations to them, which they can implement. Our partners in the Netherlands, they are young people, a collective of young people. They are more interested in making nightlife safe. They also have a night mayor. And, so it's a whole different ballgame of how people are using that data and what they think is important for their communities. Another thing that I want to say is that technology should not be a barrier by itself. So in communities where they don't have a device, they don't have digital literacy, or maybe no access to the internet, our partners have placed physical boxes, which they call talking boxes, and then they've put little notes in, and somebody has the responsibility to upload it to the site. Our site really helps you collate that data into information that can be used. So every story contributes to that pattern and trend. I also feel that you can't just put an app out there without educating people. So we've spent a lot of effort, time, to educate people on how to use it. What is the continuum of violence? What are the laws in India? How can you be better bystanders, and so on and so forth. And that has resulted in a lot of the reports coming in. So whilst it's a crowdsourced site, 95% of our reports come in through these workshops, community sessions, etc. And I will say that the last good practice is that really helping people think data. So, we are talking about technology, we are talking about disaggregated gender data, but the common person, they are not really equipped to look at this data and make sense out of it. So we spend a lot of time also helping people understand data literacy, like what does that trend, what does that pattern mean to you in your context? And how can you use and leverage this to make that change in your community, to actually, communicate to the larger community that this is happening. Often survivors say, we feel very alone in our experience. But here you have access to say, it's not just me. There are 10 others, 20 others, and it doesn't have to be big data. It just has to be relevant to your location. And even 20 reports can get the police to change beat patrol timings. So I'll just stop.
Thank you. I'm sorry, for some reason I'm not able to start my video. That's okay. I'll just carry on and then meanwhile figure out how to switch on my video. Okay, so Lisa, what we understand that the app what you are working, okay, it's okay. The app what you're talking about, how the app works as an enabler. It's just not only like an SOS app, what you have rightly said, like it enables you to recognize violence. It enables you to take the reporting forward. It enables you to understand what is the situation of violence, how, and also working in developing evidence. And one more thing I really like what you said about that, how we need to establish a human connect, even to push technology, to adopt technology, and to explain technology. It cannot be only technology based thing, but how it is important to create that human connect. And with that, my question to Lisa, where you already spoke about this AI enabled chat box you are using, Bolbhan, I'm like I follow Girls Effects, and it's very interesting, like the kind of connect you are making with the adolescents, girls you are working in various countries. And so what has been your experience, because you're primarily you're working with adolescents, girls, and when you talk about again the access control and the literacy bit, what has been your experience? What worked for you in Girls Effect? Like, what are the and how did you basically come up with these kind of technological solutions, especially something like a AI enabled chat box? Was it very easy? Was it a demand from the community you're working with, or it's like a byproduct of the demand you had from the community when in terms of bridging the gap?
Okay, thank you. I'll try to answer all of the questions. But I'm going to start with just, as a technologist, I've been doing a lot of deep thinking about, and especially as a woman in technology, I've been doing a lot of deep thinking about my personal identity in the work that I do, starting there. And I think oftentimes we look at things like artificial intelligence and we see it as a piece of technology, but we forget that there's a programmer behind that is programming that piece of technology. And in a lot of the social impact work in the tech space, there's a lot of people who show up to do this work who are also members of the communities and who are actually essentially at some point in their lives having been end users. So when I think about best practice solutions and what I've seen work is to actually start at that point to say, who is working on my work? I mean, who is working on my projects, right? And so my best practice principles have been developed strongly around my personal identity in my work. And I think when you're designing technologies for a demographic of the population that you represent, and you are the end user, it's really important to think about how that impacts how you design your work. So like many of us have lived as people who have been oppressed by our skin color, our economic status, growing up in violent environments, and many times not having the access to the answers that we needed at the time. So as I've developed my best practice around that, it's also been largely informed about my own personal realization that of technology's capability to reach deep and to reach far. And I think a lot of the time as society, we are often expected to show up to our work with a socially acceptable level of professionalism, and that's often expected to be void of emotions. And I think as women in the space, we are also often ridiculed for wearing our identities on our sleeves, because being a quote unquote good technologist is often associated with so many typically male traits. So I'm a big advocate for women of color occupying the spaces in the tech industry, because I really believe that our special tool actually is an intersectional lens of the world. And I would like to start that as my baseline for my best practices. So I think in terms of best practice around that, I think it's always good to, recognize the challenges that you will encounter when you do your work in this space, because it's going to ultimately affect the product, right? I think we should think about normalizing the value of personal emotions in your work. I think we should deconstruct what we consider to be good technologists. And I think it's really important to have representation in senior roles in technology teams as well, so that young women from marginalized communities have the kind of like support and blueprint in front of them for how to succeed through the difficulties of being a minority in the tech space. And moving on to more of the technological best practices that's been informed by a lot of that thinking for me is the first one is always meet the girl where she is at, like, or your end user, wherever they are, that's where you go. And technology is obviously very unpredictable and can change, develop, or just die very, very quickly. So at all times, you need to be try to be as platform agnostic as you can, and be prepared with your technology in a way that you can also deprecate or repurpose it in different ways, because it's not always going to stay the same. And a big flaw that I've seen a lot is where people try to force the kind of technology that they've chosen. They stay married to that idea, and oftentimes it's no longer relevant. The next one is designing technology solutions that can be accessed from the lowest fidelity device up. Living in the time that we're in, it's allowed us as technologists to develop such progressive and exciting new things all the time. And it's very easy to look at what is new and be led by that in your design. But for me personally, I always try to steer my teams back to our user personas and understanding what our users actually have access to. So, what that translates to a lot of the time is if you're designing exciting experiences for high fidelity devices, then you need to still provide that same kind of excitement on a low fidelity device. And that's really affording your users dignity in their experiences of design. Next, I think always ensuring the safety of women and girls. Of course, technologies always need to be guided by safeguarding standards and data protection security needs. And then one of my ones that are really close to my heart is obviously including the girl as a co-designer. So even though I have similar lived experiences to my end users, things have changed since I've been their age, and it's really important to bring them into the room. So all of our work at Girl Effect is underpinned by in-field research and interviews with our end users through human-centered design principles. Another one that I think is really important in your teams is test. The information that you're delivering could sometimes be critical to a decision-making moment for a young girl, and your product needs to be robust. So never take budget cuts when it comes to testing before deploying it into vulnerable communities. And next, I think, is the principle of sharing your work. People are often very reluctant to share their designs and their code base with the rest of the community. But what I've learned is to always remember that the work that we're doing, none of us are competitors. We're all trying to achieve the same success for the same end user, and we should be working together. And the last one is understanding what kind of tech leadership you're employing. I think this is critical to the kind of products that you're going to get out. Obviously, we want to build teams that are representative of our communities that we're trying to reach. And someone told me once, you are what you reproduce. And I've seen this over and over again in design communities, that products become a representation of the people designing them. So those are a few of the things that I've learned over our journey, and that's proven to work really well for our teams.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa. I think that was quite an extensive guideline for all of us, how to make it community-centric, how to make it design-centric, how to make it co-design, how to test it. Thank you so much. And feel free to ask questions. I do see like some of the questions coming. Please feel free to use the Q&A section also to put your questions to our panelists. So I'll come to the last question, and it's a little larger question I have in my mind. And how do you one is connect the work at this point of time you're doing, and also your understanding of the need, digital need, or the gap of digitization, how that going to make it easy or difficult to achieve uh, goal 4 and goal 5, which is education, men's rights, uh, and ensuring this whole development index? Because we do see there is a gap in implementation. We do see whatever the SDG goals are there are indicators, then it comes down to the country specifics, then it comes down to the state and the district, and like, so the localization process, in the localization process we tend to miss out a lot of things. And what you have been saying in this session for like from the very beginning is how it is important to discuss technology with the community. Now, if we are building the technology, we are using the technology, the need of the technology, and how the technology should be created. So how do you see that, where one is what are the challenges, and also very importantly, what I was thinking while listening to you, it's not only like a NGO and the community, there are multiple stakeholders. There are corporates who are making these apps, for example. And Lisa was talking about like AI enabled act, and I was reading it, that how systemic biases in AI can actually exclude the most marginalized, how it might not include in the entire process of app making. So there is government involved in this, like different country governments. There is the corporates involved. There are the funding, the fintech organizations or the companies involved. So it's not something as simple as like we go there, we provide this, make them enabled, and then the work is over. Because I think all of us, we are working with different stakeholders. So what do you think, what are the challenges you face? Do you see the things are changing, um, I mean, in last 3-4 years, whether things have moved? Do you see companies are more accountable? Because globally there is a very less accountability lies with these companies. Even they do some kind of a problem, they are fined, like, which is nothing for them to pay. So there is no larger accountability as such, even for the government. Like, so I what has been your experience in dealing with these kind of policy advocacy spaces, and what do you think should be done, not only in terms of as a CSO but as an ecosystem? And as Lisa rightly said, I think it's important all of us, we come together, because it's not possible for individual organizations to work on this individually. So Elsa, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. This is such an important topic, and you use the word ecosystem. This is a big problem, and no one individual or organization can solve it on its own. So, when you talk about accountability is not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. If the tech companies have to be held accountable, then we have to make them accountable. We have to ask the questions. We have to demand for better systems, better protections, better boundaries, if you will. And this can happen only when we speak in one voice, but we also have the data to talk from a position of power. Right now, I am here in the UK, and we are looking at digital safety, because obviously tech companies, and we didn't speak about social media. My organization, like yours, Breakthrough, uses a lot of social media to also help people think about the good parts of it, but also the pitfalls of lack of security and safety. So it's how technology is used. Technology per se is not good or bad. It's how it is used. And we can create the frameworks for it. So, for example, when they say that they cannot, they cannot pull down posts that are, graphically harmful and toxic, they can. Because think about it, on YouTube, if you put a video, a music video, immediately you get a copyright notification, right? It gets flagged. So if they can do that for music, why can't they do it for any form of abuse? They can put protocols in place. So really, when you talk about accountability, we have to demand it. And when I say we, collectively, that ecosystem, who's that ecosystem? I think we need as many organizations and all kinds of organizations, women's rights, child rights, youth groups, all kinds, to come together and say, these are what we need.
Thank you, Elsa. Absolutely agreed. We work very closely with Safe City. So, I mean, it's been like a very standard experience for us to go to these social media platforms and flag things which they never find violating their community standard, and it might be a rape threat. So it's a bizarre situation, and how these companies work on like US laws and do not want to localize the problem. So I think localization problem is just not only SDG policies, but also these company policies. And it's very much connected. You cannot fight one battle ignoring the other bit. I'll come to Shushmita. I think when I was listening to you about your work on education, we very closely work with the government schools. In our experience, when we work with the government, especially in education, we have seen, even building curriculums, we have seen the education, understanding of education is one, and then digitization is, it kind of perceived separately. It's not perceived as like one. And I developed a curriculum for a government, and I was strictly instructed not to use any kind of technological tools and make it without technological tools to talk about technology. So because it was not very, in the government schools, they do not have those technological aids to basically make it happen. So it will be very interesting from you to understand that where do you see this challenge? Because when it comes to school and education, it's actually something which is absolutely localized. You cannot have like a larger, as you said, one umbrella solution for all, because it's very diverse. And so how do you see, like, do you see any merger happening anytime soon? Do you see addressing SDG 4? The government is intentionalizing certain things. And when I'm talking about government, I'm talking about governments across Asia. What has been your experience, and what do you think how it should be?
Sorry, every time I'm forgetting to switch on my mic. So yes, this is like, it's very interesting and also challenging for when we are working in a formal setting, and even more challenging when we are working in an informal or non-formal setting of education. So it's not only that we are working only on the formal setting. What I see is that one is, of course, there is from the government side, we have seen a lot of pushback, a lot of like you said, like it cannot be, you talk about technology without using technology, because it involves a lot of money in it. And also we have to see like how much has been the financial commitment, the domestic commitment from the governments across Asia Pacific. I think I don't need to bring up like each country like that, but everywhere, whether it is like a country where the literacy rate is high, even there, if the argument is that, okay, literacy rate is high, so the domestic financing is much lesser, but that is like a wrong argument, because it is required for other areas. It's not like the quality or the teaching. We have to put the money where the requirement is and need to assess how it is to be done. And with the changing context, like the context in 2018 doesn't match absolutely doesn't match with the context that we are today in 2023, and it will be more complex in the coming years. So that one thing I believe. The other thing is that how, with the government, obviously we have to work in a win-win situation. It cannot be like we are saying, okay, everything they're doing is like, we cannot, it's not the way also to work, because at the end of the day, when we talk about, oh, policies are there, but there is a gap in implementation, who will implement it? It's who are the duty bearers. So that we need to keep in mind, and come together with the government to see like how best we can implement, or how best we can do it. Um, in our work, the other thing that we see is that, referring to SDGs, especially 4.6, which talks about youth and adults achieve literacy and numeracy, there is a huge gap there also. You look into the whole education policy, or you look into the financing of any country's education sector plan, and try to identify how much they have put of that in adult literacy. However, it is proved everywhere that adult literacy can address a lot of problems, starting from poverty to any kind of discrimination, identity-based discrimination, and others. The second thing that I also want to highlight over here is that we are, of course, when we are talking about like now in the last 1.5 hours that we have been discussing, we are saying that access to women and girls, but I think we have to go beyond the binary, and say like access to all genders, how much it is important, because there is a different kind of difficulty that the other genders are also facing in accessing the technology. Um, Another issue, when we talk about technology, there is always the corporate, like Elsa just now, she was also mentioning, and you also mentioned. What I feel is that, see, when we look into education, already there is a lot of push for commercialization of education. Commercialization of education can actually lead to more exclusion, more discrimination, further the widen the digital divide, and pushing back the marginalized and the vulnerable groups even more in a disadvantaged situation. Now we need to now start asking, like, where are the regulatory frameworks? What kind of regulatory frameworks are required uh, when we talk about, especially in the technology? Because if there is a commercial capture in the technology, it will further make the whole situation difficult, and the marginalized becomes more marginalized. They are constantly pushed back, because we see like a large chunk are being left behind. So I think these, and that is something, what I feel is that, as you were saying, there can be technologies, but how much do we know about it? There can be policies, but how much do we know about it? So a constant enhancing the capacities at different levels, that is also very important, because we need to constantly talk about it as civil society organizations. That's, I think, that we should be doing, constantly building the capacity, asking those critical questions, like why this is happening and what best we can do. It's not like saying you bad and I am good, not it cannot be, but asking those questions and trying to find the answer together. And finally, I would like to say, like in social media that you brought up the issue, we are seeing a lot of hate speech, which is like something that has come up so much nowadays, so much of hate speech at the online level. I think we have to start thinking how we counter positively, how we bring up a narrative, online narrative, which counters it. Countering hate with hate, as we all know, won't work. So come up with a counter narrative which is much more positive, which much more gives a different kind of a scenario. So I think that is something that is coming to my mind. And in ASPE, we are trying to work on these areas in different ways, like through advocacy, through capacity building, through partnership and all. Thank you, Barshan.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sushmita. I think that's pretty clear what kind of approach we need to take, especially localizing the SDG indicators, and how do we get like all the stakeholders on board and basically finding the right way to approach this whole issue. Lisa, what do you think, like how do we localize? Because you have been talking about how you are working with adolescents, how you're co-designing things. But when it comes to, bridging those gaps, and what has been your experience in terms of dealing with multiple stakeholders and localizing these policies?
So something that's come to caught my attention recently was a conversation about in the technology space about utilizing artificial intelligence to inform policymaking. And that's going on the assumption that we can rely on artificial intelligence to make unbiased decisions. But like I mentioned earlier, oftentimes we forget that there's a person sitting behind behind the screen programming that artificial intelligence. And I think that there's almost like a call out to have an urgent focus on fixing our approach and standardization to how we collect data. And I think also mentioned earlier about, big tech actually just like does not prioritize utilizing any of their technologies for good. And it made me think about an example of a big tech corporation who a few years ago, what they did was they wanted to make use of artificial intelligence and machine learning for the recruitment process, right? So similar to making policy making, they were going to use it to do this. And they basically processed, and it's a tech corporation, like I mentioned, they processed 10 years worth of data through this machine learning process. And a couple of months later, they discovered that they had a problem with diversity on their teams. And so, surprise, they had a problem with diversity because majority of their applications and the CVs that they based their artificial intelligence on was applications from white cisgendered men. And so anybody who identified as a woman or went to an educational institution that had the words woman in it was basically disregarded from the list as not a good applicant. And while that story is really sad and amusing at the same time, it is useful as an example for, I think, where we still are at in society, where we don't actually, we're not ready or at the point of having intersectional data to inform policymaking. It would still be at a very vulnerable place of being generalized decision making. And I think that, that would be my comment on, like, what solutions do we have to contributing to this from the tech side of things is we need to clean up our data, and we need to be way more inclusive than we're being at the moment, because AI is moving at a very rapid pace. But I'm really, really worried about who we're leaving behind and who we are creating further biases against. So yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. I do share the same concern when it comes to, like, I was reading that how in US and we never know that how it comes to the other countries, the AI being used to create prison policies, and how anyway the prison has like so much of systemic biases. Like we know, like a particular color of people you will find mostly in prison. In India, there will be caste, religion, different issues out of it. And if the government try to use AI to build policies on the basis of the present prison population, it's definitely going to give a very, very biased policy. So how it is important to look at the systemic biases, what we have at this point of time. It's important to look at the norms, what we have, because all of us, you three, and like in terms of like what breakthrough do, we have been facing, no matter what kind of policy interventions we are trying to bring, a lot of things get stuck at the normative level, the cultural level, the systemic bias level. And it is important to incorporate those challenges when we are developing a policy. Now, who is developing those policy? What the composition of the team who is developing policy? Is it like a majoritarian identity, or there is a representation or marginalized identity? So it's been like a constant challenge, and we have to figure out that how do we go ahead about it. We have like another 15 minutes. If there is any question, I don't see any question in the question answer. I do see a lot of people commenting and sharing their insights about the question. But if you have any question, feel free to put in the Q&A section or just write in the chat box. Or else, I mean, we are almost at the end of the conversation. So I'll just take like 1 minute from each one of you and just give you final comments about this whole, again, adoption and the practice and the gap, but something solution oriented. What do you think? If given like one key thing you had like all the power to do, what would be that thing you want to change at this point of time, which is for you maybe not working that right? Lisa, you want to go first? I have been asking you questions at the last.
That's quite a question to think about. If I could do one thing to change it, I'm not sure. I think that an important call to action at the moment in the technology space is that technology can't solve all of the problems by itself. Even if we're moving to a more progressive space and technology is evolving and enhancing, what we still need is equality. We still need equal access, and we still need policy change that is driving that accountability to that equality. So for me, that would be in summary that this is something that needs to be considered less in isolation than it was previously, and we really do need to start thinking about legislation around technology and what policy can do to break inequalities.
Thank you, Lisa. Sushmita?
Yeah, I think if I look into the challenges that we are facing, and also the communities that we are working, and how far they are from like what is happening, there is a wide gap between where they are and what is happening on the other side of the world. So I think from our end, we more look forward for like a certain technology must be for all, serving the needs and interests of the learners, teachers, and all the education stakeholders, which will strengthen the right to education and not make it for few people. So it has to be like, as per the SDG says, that it has to be free and universal, and also how technology can be in that, working in that. And secondly, I also feel is that, see, there cannot be a full shift from like a face-to-face to online, or like other way around. So we need to think of long-term strategies to address the challenges and ensure that learning continues, where we have face-to-face learning in schools, communities, and homes, and also which is blended learning programs, which has field learning, and also supported by online learning modalities where it is feasible and desirable. So it's not like, again, as I said earlier, not one size fits all, but we need to look into the reality, the situation, and it must come accordingly as we planned accordingly. Thanks.
Thank you. Elsa?
I would echo that and say that digital rights should be included in human rights. And you know, see, technology is here to stay. So whether we like it or not, you know, our lives are going to be very much intertwined with it. Whether it has come to your community or not, that's a matter of time. So education, access, protocols in place, legislations, all of it has to keep pace with current times. And like, Shushmita said, it needs to be an equal and a safe world and a just world. So if we can get lawmakers, technologists, civil society, and other private players into the room to work on these things, I think that would be a game changer.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been a very interesting and enriching conversation with all of you. I think we do have like some very key takeaway. One, I think it's universally, there is no universality of technology. So we really need to understand and do a reality check wherever we are trying to implement the technology, in terms of whether it's human centric, whether it's co-design, whether it's important or it's required by the community we are trying to reach out to. It's important to have multi stakeholders. It's important to have governments, corporates, CSOs coming together and finding the right path. It's, again, we are not contesting against each other. We are trying to find a common solution. So how do we engage with the stakeholders and create like a path which helps us to reach where we want to reach? And I absolutely agree with Elsa, and that technology is going to stay. So we have to accept, and we have to figure out methodologies to use technology. And as Lisa rightly said, I felt I also totally echo this point of knowing the technology better. We need to critically understand how technology works, and especially how it's going to be used through AIs and this whole push on digitization. We need to understand how things are working. We need to understand the systemic biases. And yes, technology is not something like we do not need to see technology in isolation. It's basically made by human, channelized by human, created by human, implemented by human. So we cannot take human out of technology, and that is not the perfect way to go towards a just society. And it's important to reach equally. Otherwise, the most excluded will be further excluded from this whole ecosystem. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, the audience, for joining. And very interesting conversation even happening in the chat, and people want to reach out to the panelists individually. Please feel free to reach out to them. And let us see if we can create a nice ecosystem to bridge this gap. Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barsha.
Thank you
and
very much.
Thank you.